it gave up its claim, then shrewdly negotiated an agreement that added what are now Oregon, Washington, and Idaho to the Union. But Polk was still not satisfied. He now wanted New Mexico and California. And when Mexico refused to sell the provinces, he used a border skirmish along the Rio Grande to persuade Congress to declare war. The Mexican-American War lasted more than a year and a half, a bloody struggle that cost thousands of lives, and ended only when American troops finally stormed into Mexico City. In less than a dozen years, Mexico had lost half its territory. The United States had grown by more than a third. In Texas, Juan Seguin, who had fought as hard as any man for independence, was falsely accused of being more loyal to Mexico than to Texas. He was forced to slip south across the border, to seek refuge, he mourned, amongst my enemies. In California, Mariano Vallejo's dreams of a peaceful annexation had ended when American squatters arrested him in his own house.
Our race, our unfortunate people, will now have to wander in search of hospitality in a strange land. The North Americans hate us. Their spokesmen deprecate us, and they consider us unworthy to form with them one nation and one society.
After 10 years in Oregon, Marcus and Narcissa Whitman had largely abandoned their work among the Indians in favor of helping the wagon trains that now rolled ceaselessly across Cayuse lands.
I think that the Cayuse hated Narcissa. And I think that when Narcissa turned her back on the Indians, and when she dealt with them as sternly as she did, with, I think from her perspective, with all the right motives. You had to tell people who were going to hell, they were going to hell. That they came to really despise her. Way back in the early 40s, the Indians start telling the Whitmans to leave. We don't like to hear this bad talk. Leave. The Whitmans didn't go.
Three years after the Sager children arrived, measles, carried west with the emigrant trains, swept through the Cayuse villages. Half the tribe died, including most of the children. Despite Marcus Whitman's nursing, rumors circulated among the grieving Cayuse that he was secretly spreading the disease, not trying to cure it. One afternoon, 3 Cayuse appeared at the door and asked to see Whitman. One of them was the chief, Tilucaic. He had once seriously considered accepting the Christian faith, but now he had lost 3 children to the white man's sickness. When he got inside the house, he and the others shot and hacked Marcus Whitman to death.
Mother was standing looking out at the window when a ball came through the broken pane, entering her right shoulder. She clapped her hand to the wound and fell backwards. She now forgot everything but the poor helpless children depending on her, and she poured out her soul in prayer for them. Lord, save these little ones. was her repeated cry.
The Cayuse warriors carried the wounded Narcissa out of the house on a settee, killed her, then lashed her dead face. Then they set the hated mission buildings on fire. Besides Marcus and Narcissa, 11 other whites were killed before it was over, including the 2 Sager boys. Joe Meek's daughter, sick with measles at the time of the massacre, died soon afterwards. So did Hannah Sager, age 6. The 4 surviving Sager girls were orphans once more. Frontier militia pursued the Cayuse into the mountains. Finally, 5 Cayuse warriors, including Tilukait, turned themselves in so that the rest of their people would not be hunted down. Before he went to the gallows, someone asked Tilukait why he had surrendered. "Did not your missionaries teach us that Christ died to save his people?" he answered. "So we died to save our people."
Surely, if the way of the pioneer is hard and beset with dangers, at least the long years bring at last the realization that life, patiently and hopefully lived, brings its own sense of having been part of the onward move to better things. Not for self alone, but for others.
Catherine Sager, who had survived the massacre, would remain in Oregon, where she married a Methodist minister and bore him 8 children. One more than her mother Naomi had brought into the world. On July 4th, 1848, in Washington, D.C., thousands turned out to see President Polk lay the cornerstone of a new monument, a giant stone shaft modeled after the obelisks of ancient Egypt to honor the nation's first president. George Washington's America had ended at the Mississippi. But now, as Polk spoke to the crowd, the American flag flew over the Alamo in San Antonio, Texas, above the Palace of the Governors in Santa Fe, over a growing Mormon settlement in the Great Salt Lake Valley, at Spanish ranches in Sonoma, California, and near the ruins of the Whitman Mission in the Pacific Northwest. Polk's nation was a continental United States that stretched from sea to sea and now encompassed the West. In only a generation, by enterprise and intimidation, by sacrifice and by outright conquest, Americans had seized it all. Back in the nation's capital, standing next to the president at the ceremony, was the old mountain man, Joe Meek. His fondest wish had come true. Born in Washington County, Virginia, he was now the sheriff of a brand new Washington County in Oregon Territory. A month later, even more good news arrived from this newest section of the country. In California, on a stream named the American River, gold had been discovered. Nothing in the West would ever be the same again.